share with the audience one book or movie that you would highly recommend on this topic. But just briefly go through the introductions. Anyone like to start?
I can start. This is Melissa Cronin. I am happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I'm a grad student, actually. I'm a PhD student at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and I study ecology. Particularly, I work on marine fisheries, so catching fish, basically. And when they accidentally catch other things that they don't mean to catch, this is called bycatch. So I work on fisheries bycatch, mostly on sharks and rays. It's a really big topic. I'm happy to talk more about it. Some book that I can recommend. There's a great book by a New York Times correspondent called Ian Urbina, and it's called, it's slipping my brain. Hold on. Something about like the law of the sea or something. Anyways, it's about high seas fishery, fishing way out in the middle of the ocean. And Ian Urbina is the author. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for sharing.
So, hi, I'm Anna Carolina Miller-Quiroz. Thank you for having me here and having this opportunity to share a little bit about what we do. I'm a researcher at the Virtual Human Interaction Lab at Stanford University, and I'm in charge of the environmental education there. So my background is in cognitive psychology, and I'm mostly interested on how virtual reality can impact cognitive and affective aspects of learning and behavior change. So most of our projects, we focus on how we can use VR to enhance education, particularly environmental education and climate change, how we can, enhance awareness. And a major problem that we concentrate most of our research is about ocean acidification. And I'm happy to share a little bit more about what we are doing on that topic after we go to the network time. In a book, well, I don't know how many of you are used to virtual reality. Maybe some of you, this is going to be kind of the first time you're having an experience with a virtual world. And there is a very interesting book from Professor Jeremy Bailenson at Stanford that's called Experience on Demand. And it shows how VR has been changing over the years and how it has been used, for education purposes and also to promote climate change awareness.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Jenna Seiden. I am an emerging tech advisor, mostly working in VR. Actually, one of the very first pieces I ever helped distribute was Stanford's Ocean Acidification project
Awesome.
3 years ago. So I'm very familiar with you and Jeremy, and do great work there. But I'm also the general partner and the co-founder of Zambezi Ventures. And what we are is we believe that venture capital and technology is a key way to solve a lot of the wildlife and biodiversity conservation issues. We have a fund focused on sub-Saharan Africa, where we are investing in the community in high growth industries as well as local opportunities, where we invest in everything from ecotourism to agriculture. And through that, we are supporting the SDGs 1 and 8. We're increasing jobs. We are lowering the poverty level. And at the same time, we believe the technology, we have a nonprofit arm to our initiative where we are building a curated tech stack of anti-poaching technologies so that we have about 84,000 acres of land that we are working with in Zimbabwe. And we feel that if we can create this sort of open source architecture that other reserves can access, we can do great projects with universities such as USC and create some predictive models and using optimization algorithms to help people to do conservation resource planning. Together, this sort of nonprofit tech side of things, plus our for-profit, giving market level returns to investors, this whole ecosystem play enables sort of, poaching, our mission to stop and eradicate poaching, zero poaching, happen much faster. The problem is philanthropies, as wonderful as they are inefficient. Not a lot of the money goes to the sources, goes to all the research that needs to be done. A lot of the technology partners who are very noble in their cause are developing in silos, and we want to help them get their projects and their products and their services out to the market faster. We want to help those reserves deploy them faster, and we want to make sure that the communities who are dependent on poaching have other alternative income sources. And so we do that through our investment fund and through our nonprofit technology fund. And a film, I think, or you said any film or book or anything. I think today, I don't know if it was released today, James Cameron released a documentary called, I think I'm going to pronounce it wrong, Akashingo, but it's about a whole female anti-poaching set of rangers. So it's a wonderful short documentary that National Geographic supported, so I encourage you to watch that.
Thank you. That's great to hear from all of you. So now I'm going to go right into the questions. So the first one I have for each of the panelists is, what are the major problems in conservation today? Melissa, if you'd like to start.
Sure. So one of the big problems that I work on is overcapacity of fishing fleets. So what I mean by that is that we have too many vessels on the ocean with too much power. Since over the last century, really, fisheries have been increasing their pressure on our oceans. Not only have they been going farther because they have better technology, but they've been fishing more and more and more. And a lot of our really amazing biodiverse ecosystems, especially those that are sort of out of the reach of coastal areas, are really being hit hard by some of these giant super tanker vessels. So one of the biggest problems that we work with is this overcapacity and its impact on threatened and endangered shark species. So I work mostly on manta rays, but there's also tons of other shark species. They're kind of the same group, sharks and rays. Oceanic white-tip sharks, I mean, you name it, they're getting caught by these really big fisheries. So what we try to do is not only to limit that problem, but also to work with the fishermen to try to reduce it. So we're working directly with tuna fisheries right now to try to develop ways that they might fish differently so that they can avoid catching some of these really endangered species. But, some of our big goals are to actually decrease capacity in those fisheries. That's a much bigger task and one for maybe another day. But the biggest problem I face is that now our technology has outstripped the environment or the ocean's capacity to handle it. So we really need to think about, how we consume seafood. Are we consuming sustainable seafood, or are we just sort of letting these fisheries really go to town on the ocean? So that's what I see right now as one of the biggest problems facing my sector of conservation.
On our front, even though our focus is on anti-poaching, there are other challenges that we face that we think by solving for that, it trickles into these other areas. So obviously there are problems with poaching, but as well there's human-animal conflict that's happening due to climate change. The animals are encroaching upon people's farms. The droughts are affecting such things as well. So that's a major issue that's all included in the things that we look at. There's reforestation issues, obviously, that we deal with due to animal migration patterns. Elephants, for example, are great seed carriers, and so they can help reforest these properties. But at the same time, we have a lot of the challenges due to climate. So how do we deal with the fourth use case? The fourth challenge that we faced is rewilding the elephants that have been orphaned, or any animal that's been orphaned. So all of these things work together in this ecosystem that we have. And so we're hoping that, by bringing this technology together and collecting data from all of these sensors, be they pseudo-satellite level drones, be they infrared cameras, to the networking systems of Cisco, if we can collect all that data and those multimodal sensor data and then put that together into a database, an intelligent database, we can use that to inform us to deal with a lot of those problems. So sort of can't choose poorly. There are too many problems that we all need to solve. But for us, it's anti-poaching, animal rewilding, human-animal conflict, and reforestation. It all works together.
Yeah, in our lab, what we focus is on ocean acidification. And this topic is particularly because, it's away from us, away from most of people in the world. And we are also very interested on how, take action to help people to reduce their CO2 emissions and to bring the awareness of how these emissions, they impact the world, even far away from where you are. So what we have been learning from, having the experience the Stanford Ocean acidification experience being shown all over US and in some other countries in the world, is that people has a very little knowledge about ocean acidification. And sometimes when they think about ocean acidification, they think about acid rain. And something that's really important is that ocean acidification is happening and it's impacting especially the coral reefs and shelled species underwater. And what we want to do is to bring this awareness and to help people think about how on a daily basis they contribute to this increasing CO2 emissions in the atmosphere and how it impacts the ocean even far away from them. So what we want to, one of our goals is to help people to understand how they can change their behavior. And that's what we mainly do on our projects.
Thank you. What are people doing today to solve those problems?
Well, for me, sorry, go ahead, please.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
It's hard to take cues when you're a little avatar. Well, for me, we're working on, working with the fisheries to try to make them fish more sustainably. In terms of like what other people can do, in the world, what you all can do, is learn more about where your seafood comes from, especially. You might be surprised to know that your can of tuna, probably several or potentially several hundred sharks die in the process of that fishing, in even just a week. And so learning about your seafood and where it comes from is super important. There's tons of resources out there to help you make really good choices for seafood consumption. There's apps, there's little wallet cards you can carry around with you. When we finally can go to restaurants again, you can pull it out and look really cool. And especially with tuna, which is a really big industry, kind of making sure that you buy tuna that's sustainably fished is really important to conservation for a whole ton of endangered species. Turtles, sharks, rays, I mean, you name it, the tuna industry hits it. So I would say, there's the consumer side of things where we can all pitch in, but there's also this other side of like researchers and fisheries managers and governments working to make their seafood industry more sustainable. So there's lots going on, but a lot of it is not really well known about in my field, at least.
You can look at our problem of poaching from the supply and the demand side. My partner and I are not going to be able to stop demand. There are certain parts of the world that, are actively trading in ivory and rhino horns and giraffe tails and pangolin scales. We can't help there. The whole world can. They can sign petitions. They can petition the government. They can help with that group momentum. But for us, it's really being on the ground and leveraging our backgrounds in venture capital and investment and technology. And so that's why we are, going out to some very aligned in hearts and heads individuals to help us invest in the community, really to bring them the jobs and bring them the tools and the money to afford some of the technology that's out there so that we can stop at the supply level. If we can cut off a lot of the routes between Botswana down to Wenge National Park, where there are 50,000 elephants, an elephant is killed every 15 minutes. If we can stop that and then give those people who have no other resources or salaries coming from anyplace else, and a job through investing in the community. So we're looking to people, friends, family, high net worth individuals to help us invest. But we're also looking to a lot of the CSR initiatives from corporations, the tech corporations, a lot of the brands who have those divisions to sort of come in and support us, because we think it takes, both sides, public-private partnerships as well as individuals to contribute. Again, we're doing things at the ground level, not at the demand level, but we encourage everybody to, figure out what they can do in their community, because again, there's poaching in Africa, there's poaching in India, there's issues all over the place with wild fish and so many different things in terms of animal conservation.
Yeah, and for us, we are trying to bring awareness to as many people as we can. So we started having, public tours at our lab at Stanford, where people could go through the ocean acidification experience, learn more about it, learn more how they can act on a daily basis to help to decrease their CO2 emissions. But now we have scaled up this a little bit, and we have made partnerships with museums, aquariums, other institutions and organizations all over US and in Europe. And we have also offered the experience for free. So anyone that has a VR headset, they can go through the experience and learn about ocean acidification. And that's something that was really interesting. So, for example, some years ago at the Tribeca Festival, who would say that we would have like a queue of more than 100 people willing to learn about ocean acidification? And we had that, hundreds of people waiting to their turn to go into VR and learn about ocean acidification. So what we have been doing is, trying to reach as many people as we can. And here, especially in Bay Area, we are bringing those experiences to schools, because we know that kids, they have a very strong power to change their family behavior. So that's something also we are doing. We are working with several schools here in Bay Area.
Thank you. The next question I have is, what is your organization specifically doing today to solve these problems? If you could speak more about your research projects, and other programs.
So I'm actually at a university, so we partner with organizations to make progress. Right now we partner with a very, very large tuna fishery based technically in San Diego, but it actually covers about half of the Pacific Ocean. It's the second largest tuna fishery in the world, and it's worth many, many billions of dollars. It's big tuna with a capital B. And so we work with them to actually develop different ways that first we work with them to actually study the problem, try to figure out which species are worst hit by fisheries. And then we're working with them to try to develop different ways that they might actually fish to avoid killing some of these pretty endangered species. And so there's like a lot we can do to change, like make little tweaks to their fishing. But like the panelists have mentioned, there's sort of these like supply and demand things that we can also address. I don't really work on the sort of consumer side, but since we're in a group that might, be tuna consumers, there is certainly a lot that can be done to reduce actually the amount of fishing that we do for tuna, which would really solve the problem, before these species ever get hit. And those are things like, if you see a tuna brand that is not great, you don't buy it. There was a really historic, incredible, huge boycott of tuna I believe it was in the 90s, that was really successful at getting them to stop bycatching dolphins. And that's one good example of, grassroots people kind of getting together and saying, no, we do not want our tuna served with this side of dolphin. And so those are some other things that people can do around this bycatch problem that are less about, you don't have to be a big researcher or a scientist to do that type of thing. to start a grassroots program to change the consumer patterns of tuna.
Yeah.
I think we're in a really. Oh, I'm sorry, Melissa. Are you finished? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yes, I am. Yeah, yes,
So
thank
sorry.
you.
Our company we're a B corporation, and we're really interesting, I think, because we're third party. Think of us as producers in a way. We look at the situation sort of holistically from the economic side of things and from the technology side of things. And on the technology side, you've got, like I mentioned, wonderful companies and people creating amazing things, but they are doing it in a silo, and they know everybody in the anti-poaching space. It's a very small group of friends, but it's sort of something called, I'm quoting somebody else, co-opetition. They all work together, but they can't share their tech specs. We as a third party can sort of rally everyone and work together and create this sort of integrated system so that everybody can work together, think about what the corporate goals are so that we sort of can advance the conversation and get things produced faster. So that's on the technology side, where we sort of don't have to deal with a lot of the strings of the politics inside a corporation, inside of an NGO. Again, all well-intentioned, but we get to be on the other side. And then on the investment side, Africa, where we focused, has some of the highest returns when you invest for anywhere globally. And for us to be able to go in there with sort of the acumen of sort of the Bay, right, the Silicon Valley acumen that we have, and really help them understand how to set up those corporations, bring them some public-private partnerships, find those dollars to some of the most innovative things that can come from anywhere, and especially the natural resources that they have. That's really good for us, and I think it's good because we don't have to sort of be beholden to a lot of the politics in a lot of places, so we can act as that independent third party. So hopefully by us project managing, being producers, bringing in dollars, we can expedite and create some more efficiencies on both the investment side and the technology side so that we save animals and protect the planet.
And for us, in terms of research, what we are doing, we are bringing the experience and testing different versions of some experiences to better understand how to communicate about climate change. Because we know that communication is a great part of it. And so we have this project going on, for example, now where we have study sites all over the US, some in Europe, where we want to identify the best way to communicate about climate change. So we are learning from all these participants, thousands of them all over the world. So that was one target we had, like having a diverse population, a large population, so that we can understand best how to communicate about climate change and how people trust about that information that they are receiving and so on. So in terms of research, that's what we are doing and trying to help to enhance awareness about climate change.
Thank you. Now I'm going to move on to the next, second to last question. What is your vision of conservation for the future?
Ooh, that's a good question. For me, sorry, I keep going first. Maybe it's easiest. My vision for the future of conservation, which of course maybe we're all thinking about now because it's really seems like this is a big time in history and potentially a time, especially for wildlife conservation, to sort of reset. I just read a story this morning about Milan, the city in Italy, closing down some of its roads to car traffic, and after the pandemic are turning them into pedestrian walkways. It's like amazing. Like there's
That's
these
nice.
kind of, super cool, right? There's sort of these opportunities to say, okay, post-pandemic, what are things that we might not want to go back to? For me in the fishing world, it's certainly a hard thing to ask, but it does make me wonder, what are the seafood products that we actually don't need to spend 2 weeks traveling on a vessel to go and fish in the middle of the high seas, in the middle of the ocean, using a ton of fossil fuels for a product that is really for a luxury market, for really maybe we don't need to go and actually fish that when it comes along with all of these other problems. And I think, more broadly for conservation, what are the things that we actually don't need to live? We're kind of learning right now what are things we need to live. You need toilet paper, but we don't really need some other things. We don't need meat every single day from a factory farm. We certainly don't need, fossil fuel as much as we might have imagined. So I see a future for conservation where we, are prioritizing things that we need and are hopefully relying less on things that are extraneous so that we can maybe make sacrifices, but for ultimately a higher goal, which is living in harmony with the planet. And then finally, sorry, this is a bit long-winded, but something that's really come to the forefront right now with conservation is wildlife trade, especially because there's suspicion that coronavirus came from a wet market where wildlife products are sold. Really complicated issue. Certainly, I'm not an expert on it, but I hope that, post this sort of crisis, we can give a lot more attention to the ways that wildlife and conservation is tied to public health. Really, really important for public health. And hopefully we can, really direct some serious energy on wildlife trade to protect ourselves, really, so we don't have to experience this sort of pandemic again. I think that would be great for all of us, but certainly great for some really jeopardized species.
I'm not a scientist, and I don't know where this pandemic came from, but yes, it seems that could be a cause from, coming from a wet market. And I think Steve on the first panel, mentioned that, as humans encroach upon the land and don't treat it with respect, you're going to have these untold consequences of just human-animal conflict. And I think we need to all be responsible and think about our actions as we build our cities. We have to be much more sustainably focused. Obviously, we had the Sustainable Cities panel in the beginning. I think there are a lot of, there's a domino effect that we need to think about all those layers that, building sustainable cities, how does that affect the larger environment? So I would just hope that the future is just that it's not an afterthought to live sustainably, that it's just sort of something that the next generation just accepts as given. It's not something that people take for granted anymore, and that more corporations really become B corporations and start from their own bylaws thinking about what they can do, whether they are in the consumer products business or architecture, who cares what it is. So I would like just everybody to just accept it as a norm that we need to all live much more sustainably.
Yeah, I agree with you both. And I think that as Melissa just mentioned, like the pandemic brought to us so many of the, consequences of what has been happening on the last many years close to us. So we will start to see even more frequently consequences of, daily behaviors and industry habits that we have, that we are going to be more aware of what is going on and, the consequences about what we do in the environment. And also, I think that as technology is evolving, a great amount of energy is going to be spent on finding solutions to reverse the negative impacts that we have so far in the environment, as it has already been doing, right? So, for example, we know that there are some companies, startups, or big companies as Google, for example, that they are investigating how to remove CO2, the carbon dioxide, from the atmosphere. So I think that we will start to think about also using technology to reverse what has been done so far and how we can change behavior, industry, society in general, to avoid getting these impacts in the future as well.
Thank you so much. I know we're running a little bit over time, so if I could ask that we make this last one a little bit brief. How can people learn more about your organization and support you?
Yeah, that would be great. My lab, I'm part of a lab at UC Santa Cruz run by a professor there. It's called the Conservation Action Lab. The website is CCAL at UCSC, or sorry, at .ucsc.edu, ccal.ucsc.edu. That's a great place to learn about a little bit about my work, but also about this awesome other work that the lab members are doing on a bunch of different species, sea turtles, rays, all this stuff. And then my website is melcronin.com, www.melcronin.com. And and then I'm on Twitter tweeting about like weird stuff, but a lot of conservation stuff at Melissa_Cronin. Hope to hear from people there.
You can just find us at zambezipartners.com. You can find out about our advisory, our nonprofit tech initiative, and our venture capital fund that we are currently fundraising for. So you can just find us there. I think my email's up there, and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Yeah, and we are a lab at Stanford, so you can find us at the vhil.stanford.edu, or just email me with the email that's above my head, and I'm happy to share with you the information about our projects and direct you to the correct people in the lab as well.
Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Clap, 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 clap.
Hi, thank you, you guys. You can step out in the back or maybe out of this conference to do networking. That would be great.